I'm really excited to share with you what we've been working on the past few years. And to start out this presentation, I'm going to be starting out by talking about data, because data is what has led us to have this new tool and technology to identify coccidiosis in the field. But to take a step back, we were hearing from multiple nutritionists, veterinarians, and live production managers that there was they have all of this data and there was a need to utilize it and connect it. And oftentimes that data sits in silos, it's only utilized at specific points and times, and then it isn't tracked over time in some cases. And so from there, we began looking at a lot of these field conditions and these new data points that were collected with the idea to bring more insights into health, welfare, and nutrition and sustainability for the companies and customers that we've been working with. And we have developed this digital tool that allows us to be predictive and monitor that performance and welfare and nutrition of flocks over time. And the one thing that we have learned from all of this is essentially that data is a key. It's critical, and to be able to utilize this data and to manage it in a good manner really allows us the ability to do some amazing things, especially with newer used tools such as machine learning and even AI. And so we've launched this digital precision farming tool, and it is also expanding into laying hens, swine, and ruminants as well. But the past few years, as I mentioned, we've been collecting data and building a database from commercial flocks in the US, LATAM, and EMEA as well. But to begin, we were inspired by cats. So looking more in depth on what we're collecting and the data points, we knew that in animal science fields, a lot of the veterinary practices, they were using blood biomarkers and point of care devices to monitor and diagnose certain diseases in small animals. And this was a recent paper where they were looking at cats, and they were able to look at these blood biomarkers that they were collecting from the point of care devices, and they were able to predict chronic kidney disease 12 months before the cats had any clinical symptoms. So this was a very inspiring paper. They used machine learning modeling to do this. And they had over 100,000 cats in their database to be able to build and create these models for prediction. And so moving on now to our data and the data that we capture, what this looks like for us is we have created a electronic data capture on an iPad. That we go to a farm as sampling, and we collect all of the data, including farm data from that particular location that we're sampling, biomarker data, so this includes blood measurements specifically, and then we have a trained veterinarian that joins on this as well, and they take a typical necropsy type setting where they're looking at over 40 different veterinary type observations. And so this is really where the cocci piece plays into this, and I will get into it deeper in a minute. We also collect bird level information, bird weight and sex, and then we even take microscopic samples as well, and one of those specifically is the MMX scoring. So from the data, moving from the data ingestion, how we're collecting it, then we have what's called this expert system that's in place, and this is essentially holding all of the algorithms and models that we've developed, but also our baseline ranges for the different results that we've collected from the farms. So beginning this journey, there were not a lot of baseline ranges specifically for blood parameters and those biological type measurements, but we developed a baseline range that we could then benchmark the new levels that we were going out into the field and gathering. And additionally, as I mentioned, we also have the models so that as new data is being collected, it is ran through that expert system. And so the following piece on that is the translation and relevance. So after that data is collected and it's been ran through the system, we have a team of scientists and data scientists in conjunction with peer-reviewed literature. We really pull out the meaningful information that becomes relevant to our customers and producers, and we give suggestions and insights into what we're seeing or predicting at specific locations within the field. So now just to transition specifically, that is how the data is ingested and it's visualized from the customer perspective. But I want to now go into our machine learning platform and what we've been doing. And I'm going to focus mostly on microscopic Eimeria maxima within this algorithm that we've been using. But this is one of the many examples that we have been working with. And because this is a Cocci presentation, I'll spend a second to just get everyone up to speed on the microscopic Eimeria maxima. I might refer to this as MMX through the presentation, but ultimately, when we're seeing this in the field, it results in poor growth rate, body weight gain, and feed conversion ratio in broilers. And how this is identified for us in our database and commonly in general is that a veterinarian will take scrapings of this from the intestine, and they will place that on a slide and then look at it under the microscope, and they'll score it anywhere from 0 and 4. So we're able to utilize that scoring system to validate our models that we have come up with, because we have a veterinarian in the field validating those. And ultimately, this is a concern for producers, so that's something that one reason that we wanted to focus on Cocci and MMX in particular. It's estimated to cause global economic losses of up to $3 billion per year. And it's certainly revisiting the field and being out there with the customers. It's definitely something that we continuously do see. So to start this journey on looking at Cocci, we first began with a controlled research study. And we looked at what those blood biomarker responses were to a Cocci challenge. So the birds were challenged with Cocci, and they were grown over periods of time, and blood samples were also taken in conjunction with that challenge. And what we found was that there were certain blood biomarkers, two of them I've indicated here were potassium and carotenoids, that responded to coccidiosis. But the exciting thing about this is that they actually began to shift and change 3 to 7 days prior to what we would typically look at as symptoms within Cocci that a veterinarian would look at, because we were able to follow those birds. So we had the idea here that it may be possible to generate some sort of early warning system that could give us a Cocci flag or trigger roughly around 10 to 13 days. But we knew this was a controlled research study, and this is something that we really wanted to take out into the field and begin testing. So with that, now I'm moving into what we began to build, and this is our data pipeline. So from the research study, we started going out into the field and collecting all of this data, all of the metadata around the birds. We took blood samples and veterinary postings, and we continued to build our database. And what I'm showing here is our pipeline for building that database and the process we went through to build those models specifically. And so currently we have a large, very well annotated database that we are able to test and train out models from different field conditions that we're picking up. And one important key and point with this is that our database, as it's growing, it's from various different producers. It's very diverse. It's from different seasons, different genetics, different ages as well. and it's well annotated. So we're able to really catalog all of that different information, and then we can begin to look at what is prevalent in the field, when we typically see it, is there seasonal effects, and we can begin to understand some of those conditions, such as performance data or the veterinary observations, for example. And so of this, what happens when we go to a new site is we have our database, we would go to a new location, and when we go to that location, that new data is fed through this pipeline. And it goes through a quality check, missing values are taken into account, and then a prediction on that data set is then given for the different conditions, in this case, MMX. But what we're able to do as we utilize this data set and it grows, we monitor it over time, and we monitor our model performance over time. So depending on the algorithm used, some examples for the classification type models that we're using are accuracy, precision, and recall. And if you look over here on the graph on your right-hand side, this is recall specifically. It's one of the model performances we focus on, because our data sets are oftentimes imbalanced. So we have more positives or fewer positives in our data sets than negatives. So recall is simply the number of positives out of the total positives that our model is identifying. And what you can begin to see is that as time goes on and our data set increases and we get more positives, the model performance begins to increase. And then what you'll notice towards the end of it is that it's beginning to plateau, or not plateau, but level off. And what's happening there is it tells us that that's a good time that our model may be at an optimal performance for the current data inputs or features that we are currently collecting. So once we have that information, we took the next step for us was really, we had developed these models based on a lot of data sampling and our database. And what we wanted to do is we took that model out into the field in a customer setting, and we wanted to determine, can we take a blood sample at 14 days and predict Cocci at 28 days? So if we take a blood sample at that early time point, we run it through our model, will we be able to make a prediction for the birds later at that 28-day time point? And this would essentially serve as some early warning system for the prevalence of that. And so for 3 out of those 4 farms tested, the model did correctly indicate that 28-day Cocci condition based solely on the data inputs of blood samples from the 14-day time point. So this was exciting, but we are currently in the process of really identifying what is that optimal time of sampling the blood, and what is the window for being able to accurately predict that prevalence. So really optimizing that time point of sampling. And this will depend also on the Cocci. So the MMX time point may be different than something like Tenella or a Cervulina. So we then begin to move into more detailed understandings. And because I am a physiologist at heart with all the data and the models that we have, one exciting and important area for us is to not only get a prediction for those models, but also to understand what data features or data inputs is that model using to classify or predict that bird condition. So when we're able to look at those parameters that are involved, we can begin to make connections, whether that be from the environment or nutrition, for example. And we can see that maybe, hey, this one blood parameter tends to increase the prevalence of Cocci. And we can begin to make those basic science and biological connections to what those models are using to make those predictions. And so we know that one thing to point out is that those minor changes in the biomarkers can indicate these conditions. So what I mean by this is that if we were to just look at these biomarkers individually, we may not be able to, there may not be statistical relevance, or there may not even be something that we could look at from the naked eye. But what the models are able to do is really look at all of those features, the relationships and interactions between them. So minor and smaller changes can have greater significance in those cases. So here on the images here, I have an example of just the data features and the list of ones that are used to use them to make that prediction for the model and the importance of those features. But on the right-hand side, what you can see is we began to look at not only what data features are being used, but in what direction. So is it an increase in that data feature, or is it a decrease in that data feature that leads to a positive or negative classification for a condition such as MMX? And the next part, when we have a model that is performing well and that we have validated, this is essentially what it would look like on the production user interface. So this is what the customer would be able to see and be able to gauge their score for that location. And we know that these models can sometimes be complex. So we've tried to make this a clear picture for that prediction, or even the time span of that for a specific model. So the example I have here is coccidiosis, and this is actually GAC. So that's gross acervulina score that the veterinarian picks up. But again, our models are not using the vet scores. They only use the vet scores to validate that particular condition. So what you would see is you would see the list of biomarkers listed that are leading to that prediction or most heavily involved for that location. And then also you would see this historic results. So you could really begin to monitor this over time, because ultimately we want an application that's easy to use. You're not having to dig through lots of different files and Excel sheets and trying to see, hey, what was my score a couple months ago, for example, or even last year at this season. So you can begin to look at those seasonal type trends and how they look over time. And one of the last pieces that I will mention is, I said that we've come up with these models, and they're not using they're only using that particular condition to validate. So for instance, the MMX score, that prediction is based solely on the metadata related to the bird and also the blood biomarkers. But we are still collecting the information from the veterinarian. So the veterinarian is still in the field with us collecting that data, and this provides us with a great ability to not only be able to look at what our model predicted prevalence is, but also what is the actual prevalence that veterinarian is determining in the field as well. So here I just have two examples of production model performance where what we did, and these are two completely different locations. We compared one complex, we compared what our model had the predicted prevalence of, and then we also compared what the actual prevalence was that the veterinarian picked up in the field. And we have this for acervulina as well. So to conclude this, I'm really excited about what the future holds as far as our data abilities. I think we have a lot of data at our fingertips, but we really haven't been able to bring it all together and utilize it in powerful ways. And I really think that this machine learning modeling can help us utilize some of that data and really have more of a holistic approach to all of those data sources, and begin to make potentially pick up patterns, seasonal patterns, and even take into consideration some things like age and genetics as well. So I'm excited to see what that holds. And this tool in general, has the ability to just monitor flocks when those personnel are limited. And we tend to look at it in two different ways of passive or active surveillance. So what that means to us is that we would use it in a passive surveillance to just monitor flock performance, but also an active type surveillance if there is a specific condition or something specifically occurring that we can potentially bring more insights to that that fire that is happening, or that the problem that may be harder to detect by just the veterinary posting alone. And again, the overall goal for us is to allow for some sort of early intervention before we begin to see animal performance decline. So we really want to consider not only the data that we're collecting, but what the performance for that flock looks like as well. And in the U.S., it's a very common practice to perform necropsies on birds to evaluate health, but in some areas, in other regions, this is really not the norm. So allowing a technology like this, specifically blood, to come in and give greater insights to the flock and performance has really been beneficial to the producers. And the last piece is, again, being able to link many different factors such as the diet and environment, which might alter those health conditions. So if we see a particular condition in the field, if we do a good job at collecting that data and managing it, can we begin to look at different trends or other things that might be related to that to make better informed decisions. So, yep, thank you all for listening.